Good morning as my dog bell goes off. It's Monday morning. How is everyone doing? I'm Nick Perro, not your dad. This is Sick of This Shit Publications, and we're chronically illing out on a Monday morning. I'm joined by, I'm going to read across. We'll skip the first individual on our screen for now because she's our special guest. I'm joined by my friend So. Welcome. Beth.
Thank you. Hi.
Welcome. And Dr. Stephanie Wilson. The only time I'll say doctor today, but Dr. Stephanie Wilson. Doctor of History. Doctor of History.
Yeah. But I have something new to say about this. So
okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I can do it whenever you want.
Yeah, let's say it.
So I was reading a Substack where somebody white said, "Oh no, don't call me doctor," and person of color with a PhD said, "No, keep your title because that sets the standard for them to use titles for people of color and not just
not just
let
names.
it go." Right. But so for here, we're just going to go with Stephanie, but I just wanted to share that because it made a lot of sense.
It does.
Very cool. It does make a lot of sense.
And I kind of like Doc Steph.
Okay, Doc Steph.
Doc Steph. Excellent.
And as we derail ourselves, before we even get into our conversation today, we'd like to welcome on our special guest, Natasha Duran Moulton. Moulton?
That's right. Yep. That is me.
First or the second one? Moulton or Moulton?
Moulton.
Moulton. Okay. Yeah. Good morning, Natasha. Welcome. Can you introduce yourself to everyone and say hi to the audience as folks are coming on in and joining us?
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. I'm Natasha, chronically ill, disabled veteran. I wish that I could say that the chronically ill came from the military, but honestly, it probably came way before that. But yeah, I spent 11 years in the military. Oddly enough, 5 of those years as a generator mechanic, and then the rest of those years working with F-16 pilots. So not anywhere near with what I'm doing now. So after that, worked through, I'm currently working on my PhD as well, Doc Steph. I'm getting my PhD in physiology and health.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, I'm in the dissertation phase. I'm a PhD candidate for now, but I wear my title with pride because it's taken a lot of work to get there. And one of the things that I work on specifically is I focus mainly on life and wellness coaching and the coaching approach to healing. And so part of that coaching approach to healing is about using our language and using our words in order to empower ourselves and in order to advocate for ourselves and really change the trajectory of where we're going in life so that we can create our own experiences. And so it's what I encourage people to do. Right now, what I'm focusing on mainly right now is integrative medicine and integrative wellness techniques for women with PTSD. So it's what my study and research is focusing on right now. But yeah, I'm a woman of a jack of all trades. I've got that going on. I'm raising a teenager. I'm teaching full time, and then my husband and I also run a horror convention of all things.
Wow,
that's cool.
So, yeah, I'm all over the place, while also dealing with just like I said, chronic illness as well.
I love it. Welcome. Well, thanks for your service. From one vet to another, thanks for your service. I was not expecting either of those MOSs from you.
AFSC. I was in the Air Force. I was
were AFSC.
You? I take it you were Army then.
I was Army, yeah.
You were Army.
My cousin was in the Air Force, or I have a cousin in the Air Force, or was in the Air Force. I have cousins in the Navy. Most of my family is Army, though, so go Army. You guys are the bus drivers of the sky, as we like to call you.
Yeah.
The Army has more planes than the Air Force, and so does the actually the Army has more helicopters than anybody else, but the Navy has more planes than the Air Force.
Yes.
And I think the Army does too, which is kind of weird. But welcome to it's fun to talk about that stuff. I So before we get into anything, before we get too derailed here, we're not going to go down any rabbit holes of what's going on current events, because there's a lot of shit going on, and our space here is not meant for that. We don't
Mhm.
want to bring that into our space, and we want to focus on what Natasha knows well and what we know well, which is chronic illness and how we face it. And I'm going to read a short disclaimer. It's not on the screen, and it's not going to scroll across the screen in any way. It may at some point eventually if we ever want to do that. However, quick disclaimer for Chronically Illing Out. We are a podcast and weekly roundtable discussion that provides a safe space for real chronic illness and mental health conversations by people with lived experience and lived experience only. We are not trained professionals. We do not claim to be trained professionals, and we do not masquerade as trained professionals. We're just people with experiences, who have conditions, who talk about them. And we come at them and we say what tools we've used. We discuss our stories and current events to build community and solidarity. And you're not alone. If you are in crisis, do not reach out to us. Dial 988. Call or text 988 and get support if you need it. And that's it. Have a great morning, everyone, for that. We'll start all of our show for this too. Is if you, especially if you're in the U.S., if you need support, dial 988. It is a tool that you can use that is helpful. It saves lives. Like Natasha, I want to get maybe your thoughts on something like that. As someone who works with shame and blame, who is a chronic illness sufferer themselves, what are your thoughts there?
So one of my earlier jobs was I was actually on the other end of the 988 line. I was a crisis intervention and suicide prevention counselor, and I use that term very loosely, but mainly in the state of Vermont. And so
I'm from Vermont.
Oh, are you? Yeah, I lived
Wait, no, I know your name. Now I know why it all sounds familiar.
Oh no.
I know your name
Small
somehow.
world.
Like it sounds familiar to me because I'm like, when have you been in Vermont your whole life?
Not my whole life, no, but most of my family. So it's my late husband who grew up in
Okay.
Vermont. His dad is like a teacher in Bristol, and like he's got a lot of family through there. So the Durand's name probably is fairly
It could be. It
it's the
sounds
Durand.
so familiar and I
Well,
just couldn't figure out why. And now I
I
know.
also worked with the National Guard there. I worked with the Army National Guard at their Joint Operations Center in
When were you
Colchester.
there?
Oh gosh, I was in New England for 10 years. So from 2008, I only recently moved to South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've been in South Carolina for almost 5 years now. So yeah, I still go up to Vermont quite often too. All of our families up there. Small
Oh,
world. It's such a
yeah,
small
it is. My dad was part of the Vermont Army National Guard out at Camp Johnson. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So I
you
worked at Camp
like sort of
Johnson.
you may have just missed my dad.
Maybe, but I worked at Camp Johnson. I worked in their little room with no windows. Because we had the like confidential room, the
Mhm.
little skiff area where they, so we would get in information from deployments and everything, but we also had the suicide hotline phone in that
Yeah.
office. And so that was our main part of our job was calling in. And I do want to say, yeah, call that number. That's what those people are there for. And it goes back to kind of what we were saying before we hit the go live button here. There's something powerful even just about being able to talk to somebody and get that off your chest. One of the things that I noticed for so many people who are suffering from chronic illness or chronic mental health illness is that oftentimes we get locked up inside of our own head. And so it's like releasing a rubber ball in a sealed off room. It has nowhere to go and it just keeps bouncing around. And after a while, the sad part for us is that our brains are not disconnected from our bodies. they're all very intricately and intrinsically linked. And so when we get this going on in our head, what ends up happening is it's causing stress. And I don't know about you, but I know I've got like inflammation problems. And when I get stressed out, my whole body hurts. And
Absolutely.
it gets even harder to take care of ourselves, right? So just the act of talking about it, just the act of talking about it, being able to hear ourselves and know that somebody on the other end is just holding space and listening and creating a container for us to get it off our chest is enough to bring that stress down and help our bodies to just decompress. So yeah, definitely call that 988 number. I promise you that, nothing that you're going to say there's going to go anywhere, and nothing you're going to say there's going to surprise anybody on the other end of that line.
Yeah. Yeah. And suicide prevention and things like that help, and they're worth it. I worked at Amazon at one point, and I was on the Alexa healthcare team. And part of what we did during COVID was we built a self-checker skill where at home, you could ask Alexa, hey, I might have COVID, yada, yada, all that stuff. And it gave you CDC updates, but it also gave you guidance on should you call. And there's one of us in the background has the stream going, so we can hear it on delay just a little bit. It's weird. Check your backgrounds.
It's off.
So one of the things that I did was I got us to build the suicide prevention and self-harm workflows, which was if you said something self-harm related, it directed you to, at that time, was the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. But now it's 988 or Suicide Prevention Hotline, but there's now more resources available. And so use it. Use those skills. And it got used. Like we could see the metrics if somebody went into that path. We couldn't see if they called. We couldn't see what they said or anything like that. But the fact that it got used made, I realized how good of a feeling it was to know that I helped somebody, that what I did actually helped one person. And that was enough. And Natasha, could you talk maybe on your experiences as someone who was a counselor? Quote counselor, in your own words, for quote counselor, but as someone who is on the other side of that line, who is able to talk to people and work through experiences. How did you let yourself feel like a response from that? And going in our title, Shame and Blame, how did that work into the job you were doing and what you had to do for yourself to not shame or blame yourself if you couldn't help somebody?
Yeah, so I'm going to be honest. I think part of the job, when you're working with people, to be good at your job, there has to be some amount of feeling. There has to be some amount of empathy and compassion towards that person. And so often, I was sitting there and I was listening to stories that, of people who just have hit complete rock bottom. And a lot of the people who were calling in were soldiers or family members of soldiers, who were dealing with PTSD, anxiety, depression. And they were surrounded by people who didn't know how to handle those things. And so those issues compounded because on top of it, they couldn't talk to anybody and they felt so incredibly alone. And I think that that's something we all share in the chronic illness space, is so many times we feel like I'm the only one who knows what this feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the reasons why when somebody passes us by in a hallway and they're like, hey, how you doing? We know they're not really asking us how we're doing. And we give that blanket statement of, oh, I'm okay, thanks. And we walk on by.
Mm-hmm.
But then later on that night, when these people were on the phone with me, all of that, how they were doing, was coming out. And it was heavy and it was dark and it was sad. And I really felt for them, because as a soldier who's been deployed as well, and who's had those thoughts, I knew where that person was. And, thankfully, I would say my success rate with getting these people turned around was pretty good. But there were stories, you know, there were times where I couldn't. And for me, again, it goes back to, you know, I had to find my own therapist because I couldn't keep it locked up in my head. Because if I kept it locked up in my head, that the shame of it all, the regret, I should have said this, because hindsight's always 2020, right? You always look back at a situation and you could think of 100 different things you could have done differently in that moment. And so, you know, for me, it was I needed to go and I had to have somebody to also talk to and process it. Right.
Well,
And that,
Natasha, if I can have, especially when you're working in any field that you're helping others, but especially with suicide prevention, because that is such, I mean, you know, you can't deal with that. Do you know what I mean? Like you have to have a safety net as a counselor because it's too much, you know, to handle it by yourself. So did you have some sort of support system back then within your team or?
I thankfully we did. So on the team itself, we had a therapist who was overseeing the program, but the therapist was also there for the people who were kind of like on the ground doing the work. So when we would have particularly like when we would have like really hard phone calls, we would actually get called out as a group, and then the therapist would sit with us and be like, "All right, let's talk this through." Like, we're not going to keep this bottled up inside. Like, we're going to talk through this. How did you feel? How did you react? What are you doing at home? You know, and then on top of that, it helped because I had family that understood too, you know, what I was going through. My mother-in-law at the time worked with people who dealt with chronic illness, and you know, she volunteered her time with veterans, and so she was able to kind of say, you know, if I had a particularly rough week, she'd always offer her house. She'd make me lunch and like kind of give me a little spa retreat. It was great. So I had that support network in place, you know, which was great. But again, I realized that I was lucky to have those things in place because not everybody does.
Absolutely. And may I ask, sorry, I'm sort of maybe jumping ahead, but can you explain to us how it became linked to somehow your interest in physiology? Because I find that so interesting. Like,
Yeah, well, so my interest in physiology, so it kind of starts with a sad story. So I'm going to go out and apologize now, but got a little bit of a sad story here. So my interest in this really solidified when my late husband was diagnosed with cancer. So he was diagnosed with cancer when we were pregnant with my daughter, and he battled cancer for 5 years. And one of the things that I noticed in that was that he was treated as parts and pieces of symptoms instead of as a whole person.
yeah.
And it really changed my mindset around what health is in modern Western medicine. And so my interest became this idea of like how our mind and our body are connected, because I watched and saw kind of how for him it was a lot of like a PTSD. There was a lot of anxiety and depression. There were a lot of times where I would sit in the car with him and he would cry because he just didn't want to do the chemo. His body was so tired, but he was also so emotionally worn out from the surgeries, the chemo, the radiation, and the stress and the burden of it all. And there was no one there to help him in a meaningful way. You know, they just looked at him as, oh, you know, they would always refer him out to these separate specialists who never seemed to talk to each other, who never seemed to kind of come together for a whole plan.
It sounds familiar to, yeah, a lot of us, I think, who've been involved with our peers that have, I would say, life-threatening illnesses. And I really apologize. I didn't know. I'm just like asking. And
So this has been it's been almost 10 years now that he's been gone. So this is something I've healed from completely, and more than willing to talk about. But I talk about it because again, it kind of solidifies why I got to the point where I'm at. Because when I was in my undergrad, I was like, man, I'm going to go to medical school. I'm going to I'm going to do psychiatry. but I didn't. And it was because I like really looked at modern medicine and was like, you know what, no, there's got to be a better way. And so instead of going into to apply, I decided, no, I want to find better ways of doing this. And so I went into physiology and health, but I have a focus on mental health. But I want to show how our brain and our bodies are connected, because we cannot separate the two. What happens in our head, it comes out in some way physically. And when something physically comes out, it messes with our head. Right.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I do the work that I do today. So
that is amazing that you have gone through that that realization, and you sort of like turned it into something that gives meaning, but at the same time, you know, because I have to say, I have seen Natasha on the pod with Margaret Williams back in the fall, and I have to say that that podcast really touched me. And I'm sure we're going to get to that, because we're going to talk about trauma, I think intergenerational trauma. And anyways, it really spoke to me. And I found that Natasha's, or the way that she was speaking, and also okay, it sounds cliche, but connecting all those dots, you can tell she has really, I'm well, you are still a student. So, anyways, I was
lifelong student, lifelong. Yeah. I'm never going to stop studying. But yeah, you know, I think, and that's why I opened with that I'm chronically ill, and I want to say that it started in the military, but I don't think it did. And why is that? Well, it's because, to be honest with you, there's so many patterns that were handed down to me from my parents, who got them from their parents, who got them from their parents, that have, you know, still impacted me to this day. And yes, so even when I sit down with people who I'm coaching, or even when I sit down with my students, some of the things that I ask them is like, tell me about that internal script. What voice do you hear when you're asked this question? Because when we kind of start getting down to that level, then we can start rewriting that script for ourselves as well as for future generations.
Wow.
Breaking generational traumas is something that I know Lawrence Winterman likes to talk about. And it's definitely something that we talk about. It's like part of being an adult, or part of being a good parent, or part of being someone who's trying to move forward in the world, is not passing on those generational traumas in whatever ways you can. Whether we fall short or not, in some areas we will. We have to let ourselves fall short, or know that we're going to. But in some areas we'll succeed, where we can stop those generational traumas from being passed on. And it's a cumulative effect. So it's not like if we don't get all the way there the first time, it's a bad thing. Because if you get partway there, you've partially healed that trauma. And we should let ourselves, you're talking about celebrating the little things, or we were talking about celebrating the little things. And like, I think I could have just made that up too. My brain just,
you read my mind, because I was actually just thinking, I'm like, I'm hoping you're celebrating those wins, and I could get into the physiology of why.
Oh no, it wasn't. It was. I was listening to Lawrence Winterman right before this. He was having on the Daily Whatever, and they were talking about like how to red state activists, like trans activists, continue to move forward. Some and a lot of them is, or for the guest who was on, it was, well, I celebrate the little things and I find the joy where it's meaningful. And I think that's a really just a mentality we can all use, because then we don't blame ourselves for like actually doing a good thing. Like, I've let myself start feeling good without feeling guilty for feeling good, even during times when it's really shitty. Like, it's really shitty right now in a lot of ways, but I still feel good about myself. And like, I spent time with my kids and family this weekend, and I felt good about making that conscious choice to be with them instead of jumping on the internet and telling everybody, hey, we did this terrible thing in Iran. Yes, the Iranian supreme leader, I don't give a shit about him. Like, sorry, too bad, so sad that he's gone. Like, their government is brutal and awful, and ours is too. And it's not a good thing that we are spreading our hatred, because they're not the people who are out there
Mhm.
aren't celebrating the little things in life. They only seek like this one big thing reward, whereas we choose to live every day.
Right. Well, I think understanding that nothing we do is going to solve the entire world's problems. We can't boil, as my husband says a lot, we can't boil the ocean. So,
Well, we're trying as a species. We'll
we,
see about that.
yes, I know. But like individually, we can, there's people with more impact and people with less, but no single one of us is going to solve all of our problems. Together we can, but if we're going to do that, then we have to be as psychologically resilient as we can, because it's hard and demoralizing and all those things. So I think you're right. I had a podcast, I don't know when, in the fall, where we talked about joy as a means of resistance, and feeling that joy and celebrating those wins, and while feeling the pain of others, not necessarily feeling either guilt for not being in the middle of it, or guilt for not being able to solve it ourselves.
And I don't know about you guys, but you were talking about breaking cycles, and I definitely have this internal script in my head of my father saying like, kind of like always saying like, oh, you shouldn't feel da 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 because there are always people that are worse in the world, or kind of like minimizing your feelings, like something happened to you and you're feeling sad or hurt, and it's like kind of like just saying like, ignore them and just think of what's worse in the world. Like,
Right. I'm curious. So I have a teenager too, as does So, and Nick's might have graduated to teenageship.
Almost teenage.
tween.
Almost
You have a
teenager.
tween.
So I have done everything I can to do almost the opposite of what my parents did. And yet I have come to the understanding that no matter what I do, my kid I will have fucked him up in some way that I can't even conceive of. And so like letting ourselves off the hook for things that we don't even understand and know, even if we're really, really trying to change the scripts and do things differently and say things differently and understand things differently. There's things we can't control and things we don't know about and probably won't come out until kid has been in therapy for 20 years.
Yeah. So y'all touched on like 3 things, okay, that I talk about so often. I'm over here making notes because I'm like, man, I need to touch on this. I want to kind of circle back real quick to the whole celebrating and the small things. One of the things that I always find to be the most interesting things when I'm working with adults is how unwilling we are to reward ourselves for the things that we do, even the small shifts, the small wins that we have day to day. We're not even like willing to do like a happy dance or like yeah, you did it, good job. And it's so interesting to me because I feel like there's been some amount of shame around this idea of like we deserve to be happy when we do something. right? Instead, it's always been pointed out of like, okay, well, you did that one thing, but what about all the other things, you know? And people automatically shift away from our win and into the long list of things that we didn't accomplish that day. And so what does that do? It kills our motivation. And, you know, because here's the thing is, again, the connection between the brain and the body. The brain loves happy chemicals. And so what kind of happy chemicals does it like? Well, it likes dopamine. Where do we get dopamine? We get dopamine, that's our reward center. When we win the prize, right? When we go up to those little crane things where you get the little toy and you actually get the toy and you all of a sudden you're like, you get this surge of like happiness, that's dopamine. You know, and we do that even when we've accomplished something and then we get rewarded for it afterwards, when we get that certificate, when we get that little, you know, gold trophy. And that's also serotonin as well, right? Because we're coming out on top. We're, you know, doing the thing. Look at us go. You know, we've been recognized. And then when somebody comes up and gives us a hug and tells us how great we did, that's oxytocin. You know, that's our happy connection and love thing. And our brain craves those things. That's how we motivate ourselves to keep doing the thing.
Oh my God. You know what? I just thought, I'm sorry. Have you seen that little monkey who was like abandoned?
Oh my God, Punch. Yes. I've been
Yes.
following Punch. Yes.
And he has this,
Can we
they
not talk
given him
about
this
Punch?
this
Can
little
we
monkey.
not
And
talk
I mean,
about Punch?
and just the way that he's finding joy and reassurance and with an attachment figure that's like a little plush. And it just makes me think of that because of the oxytocin, which is kind of like what isn't that like the hormones that when you become a mom or like
yeah, that's what helps to develop attachment when we first have a baby. It's why skin to skin is so important in those first moments. But yeah, so I want to be the bearer of good news since I shared a sad story. So Punch has found a surrogate. Punch has a surrogate monkey who's taken it on, is loving it and grooming it and protecting it. So and they're actually trying to take away the orange stuffy orangutan that he had to kind of help him like really get back into socializing as a normal monkey. So I do want to.
it's amazing.
Yay!
So I'm gonna cry.
I don't know anything about Punch, but this sounds amazing.
Yeah, look up Punch the Monkey. The whole story. And I actually talked about that in either this week's Subsegment, which comes out tomorrow, or next week. I'm always ahead of myself, so I don't ever remember what I've actually put out there. But I actually talk about Punch a bit because I think a lot of people connected with him because we feel that, right? We feel we know how it feels to be kind of rejected by our peers. We know what it feels like to be lonely, to be like, man, I wish somebody would just given me a hug or said, I'm proud of you, or like recognized me in some way.
Yeah.
And so that's the importance of celebrating, right? So celebrate your small wins, because when our brain recognizes that, when our brain recognizes, hey, I did something and that made me happy, I want to do it again. That's what our brain does. I want to do that thing again. And it reinforces those healthy habits. You know, and so, you know, but it kind of feeds into, again, what I think So said about someone has it worse. How many times have we heard that? How many times have we heard someone says there are starving kids in Africa?
It's exactly what my dad would always tell me when I was young.
We use their starving kids down the street now. If we go that route, if we ever do that, we go, there's starving kids in America down the street. Like, eat your food. Celebrate the fact that you have food right now, because you're going to have a full belly and you feel good. And I know that's probably that is a blame and shame thing, but occasionally, like when I see a full plate of food getting ready to go into the trash, I don't catch myself. I don't use that stop technique of like, don't say it. Though I did catch myself stopping a critique this weekend, and I just said, no, it's great the way it is instead. And that felt better. And it was a much better response, I think. But like, we've occasionally used, there's starving kids in America down the street from you. Like, we should be more conscious of what we eat and how we eat it.
Right.
Yeah.
See,
I think there's some lesson there, but I will say it's been used as a weapon to minimize.
Yeah.
And I think especially in these spaces, it's really important to realize you're allowed to take up space.
Right.
You're allowed, and I don't think people hear that enough. You are allowed to take up space. And sometimes that's really hard for people to accept because they've been minimized for so long that it's so deeply ingrained in them. You know, that they're not allowed to take up space. They're allowed to grin and bear it and say, I'm fine, and move on. I'm sorry, Doc Steph, you look like you were about to say something. I think I stepped on you.
You didn't step on me, but you know, there's a couple things. One is, you know, with that food thing, I have a kid with food issues, and I had food issues. My parents at least did the one thing right, which is if you're not hungry, don't eat it, because that's another way of like harming your body with food. But what I wanted to focus on more is when people say, how are you doing? Can't complain. And I'm like, yeah, you can complain. There's always something that, like, you don't have to say, I can't complain because everybody else is doing shitty. No, like, I mean, you don't always want to hear whatever, I did it again. You don't always want to hear what everybody's going through, you know, like the all things considered, how's it going? I'm grading on a curve. Are you hanging in there? You know, but when somebody says I can't complain, I always like try to step in and say, yeah, you can. There's stuff in your life that you can complain about. You don't have to like not complain because other people have it worse.
Well, I think even the word complain too, right? Are we really complaining, or are we just sharing with the people who should care about us?
Right.
You know, if you care enough about me to ask, then care about me enough to hold the space because I'm not okay. You know, and that's something that I'll be honest. So I'm, you know, yes, I'm a widow, but I have found myself in another relationship, and it's one of the things that I worked really hard to establish in my relationship is that our relationship isn't 50-50. And I say that because, and I take this actually from Brene Brown. Brene Brown has done something very similar.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Yeah, I love Brene Brown. But it's this idea of like, there's some days where I have to walk up to him and say, I can give 20% today, and this is why. You know, and then there's, you know, because like for me, it's I have neuropathy in both of my hands. I have a lot of back issues, and there are some nights where I don't sleep well. I'm tossing and turning. I'm in a lot of pain, you know, and so I can't show up as my full self that day. And it's not complaining. It's filling him in as to where I'm at that day so that he can pick up the other 80%. You know, and then I do the same for him. You know, he's got some hereditary issues with his knees. And then on top of that, he played hockey as a kid and had multiple surgeries. And so he has no cartilage like at all in his knees. And so there are some mornings where, especially when it's cold outside or rainy or anything, and he's hurting, he hasn't slept, he can't show up. Now it's my turn to pick up that 80%, you know? And so I think even the language around it's complaining, it's, you know, we're putting this on somebody else. Again, it's really minimizing how we feel and what we're going through to make others comfortable and to make sure it's palatable. And I'll be honest, it's not always palatable. And I think the people in our life fully realize that. And we should believe in their strength to handle it as much as we believe in our own strength to contain it.
Yeah.
Great. But the same thing, my husband like always wants to overcompensate. And so he wants to take care of everything and I have to say, I am a grown-up. I will ask you when I need help, but right now I can do it. I said I could do it. I will do it. Like, you don't need to like rescue me. But that's another thing entirely.
Yeah.
That's from the male perspective too. On that one is, I think part of that is the indoctrination and training that we are under from generational trainings of this is what it means to be a man, is you solve the problem. You don't listen to anybody else. You just solve the fucking problem. You do it yourself. Find a way. And for a lot of us, I think that's the tee up of like, maybe we don't need to solve the problem. Maybe we can
I have a
just sit.
question. I have a question about that. Like, because you have both been in the army. What about the discourse in the army? Because I haven't been involved. I don't have a military family in Canada. It's kind of like, it's, so what have you experienced? Would you say that discourse is kind of like well seen in the army? Like, be tough, shut up, endure, like.
The amount of times I was told, shut up, take a knee, drink water, and have an Advil. Like, the phrase is literally take a knee.
Motrin, vitamin M.
Actually, what's even better I've found is Midol is the cure-all for so much. Like, it's such a good drug. Like,
What
it's
does it
such a
have
good.
in it that
I don't know, but it's made for women, and for some reason, it's better. Like, it's the anti-period drug. Like, it's
well,
for
I
period.
know it never worked.
It's a mix of ibuprofen, acetaminophen, and caffeine.
That's Excedrin. Oh no, Excedrin is aspirin.
Yeah.
Whatever it does is good.
Interesting.
Whatever it does, it works really well. And I wish, and that would be the best one, is just take a Midol, have a knee, drink water, get back up. That was the phrase in the military, is take a Tylenol, shut up, and get back out there.
Yeah. I know for me, so I had I spent 11 years. I was well on my way. I had goals of 20 years, retire, like the full thing. I made it to 11. I made it to 11 because I had a really, really bad accident in the military. And the accident definitely left me physically disabled. Like I've got definite physical limitations now. But the biggest thing was it really messed with my head. And I remember at one point, there was something that triggered me. At that point, I really had an issue with bright lights and explosions and loud noises. And I had a complete breakdown in the middle of work. And they have this person called your first sergeant. And your first sergeant's kind of supposed to be there to be like your advocate. They're supposed to be there to kind of like, help you out, when you need it. And so they were like, yeah, go see the first sergeant, see what he says. And so I went over and saw the first sergeant, told him what was going on, and I'm in tears. I am like crying uncontrollably, and I am not a crier. I don't cry over anything. Even when I got hurt, I had 1st through 3rd degree burns. Once I was able to compose myself, I was giving like directions to my guys. Here's where my cell phone is. Get this, call this person. Like I was between dealing with an immense amount of pain, was trying to like organize the guys to get things done to get me to the hospital. So I'm sitting there crying uncontrollably, and he just looks at me and goes, you know what? Why don't you just go to the hospital, see if they got somebody to talk to, and you'll be fine and go back to work. That was it.
Yep.
That was the answer. And even when I went to the hospital, even into my care in the VA system, it was, oh, well, here's a pill for that. At one point in time, I had a cabinet full. I think I was taking up to about 13 individual pills twice a day. I just had a cabinet, and it just was one whole long part of my cabinet was nothing but prescriptions. Because the way they saw it is every time I came up to them with a symptom, oh, here you go. Here's a pill for that. Here's a pill for this. Here's, even the symptoms that were caused by the pills, we're getting pills to address the symptoms.
Oh my gosh. We hear that because I think that as we've discussed this before in our show, like as chronic illness sufferers, like, the interaction of, it's like manage what are the advantages and then try to have less disadvantages. And what you're describing is, I'm sure that must have impacted the way you perceive, like, okay, this is enough. We're separating all of these symptoms, but you've described at the beginning, wanting to bring back, like, as a holistic, view of health. And I'm kind of hypothesizing here, but that must have been something that one day you said, okay, that's enough. There must be other way to deal with this, or.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's actually what drove me. So I was a civil engineer in the military. I really enjoyed it, but that's really what drove me into studying what I did. So I took my GI Bill and all of that stuff and went into studying psychology and all of that. But that, I think that was where a lot of the problem came from, those, because there was a minimization right off the bat. As soon as I said, I can't handle this, like I've got something going on. Like, I think it was at one point a light bulb popped, and you know how like sometimes you get that popping sound and you get like a big flash of light real quick. And I literally it was just anxiety everywhere. And the problem with it is that there was so much like people looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's the issue? And I couldn't explain it. And the one person that I should have been able to turn to minimized it right off the bat. And so it's one of the reasons that I go back to, if you are in a place, if you're going and seeing a doctor, a therapist, anybody, right? And their first approach is to minimize what you're experiencing, leave.
You feel even worse.
Walk out, leave. As soon as they look at you, and I know I've heard it myself, when they're looking and I was talking about my back pain, and the first thing they commented on was my weight.
Oh my God, I was about to say that whenever they like, that's the first thing. Well, if you lost weight, you might be better. Like,
right.
I can't figure out what's wrong with you. So you need to lose weight.
At that point, I had a back brace and I was walking with a cane, and I was 32 years old.
Wow.
32 years old. So you tell me first, how am I going to lose weight when I need to walk and I'm literally, couldn't stand up straight? Well, come to find out, it was because the accident I had my disc was sticking out like a mushroom out of my back. And even the radiologist, when he saw it on MRI, asked me how I walked down there. And I basically looked at him and I'm like, well, the doctors were telling me I was fine. So I thought my pain was in my head.
Someone asked a very interesting question, that can someone explain minimizing versus gaslighting?
Ooh, minimizing versus gaslighting. So gaslighting is basically, it doesn't actually exist.
Yep.
Making it up. That's not how it went.
Yes.
So the minimizing is just saying it's not as bad as you think it is, or there's starving kids in Africa, right? You're lucky to have been born in the United States. We have the best healthcare system. Now we're dipping into gaslighting.
It's only 120 stitches. Come on.
Exactly. That's minimizing. Gaslighting is when like when you sit there and let's say you are walking and you stub your pinky toe and you're like, oh my God, my toe hurts. I just ran into that. And they go, you didn't just run into that. You didn't know you didn't do that. That's not what happened. Gaslighting is skewing your reality and creating a complete false narrative around it. Minimizing is when we're just, where it's not that bad.
What is the stop being so sensitive? Like, get a grip. It's not like what you think it is.
Yeah.
Combination of both, maybe.
Yeah. That's a bit of a combination, especially when you go, oh, it's not as bad as you think it is. Because now your perception's not reality. And now they're going to make you start second guessing your reality. And I'll be honest with you, that's, again, when you start to sense those things, those are great red flags to be like, I need to just walk out of this situation now. Like, get yourself out of that situation, regardless of who it is, doctor, therapist. And I'm sorry to even say it, family members. That's exactly what I was just about to say, family members, right?
Walter Ryan and I have talked about this too before, where he's talked about when I did an intelligent masculinity interview with him, he talked about the idea of an unqualified no, where when you do an apology, you apologize for the harm that you did, and that's where you can work through it. And then if the response to that is, well, and you also did this harm and this harm and this harm and this harm, and there's no end to the wrongs that you had done, walk away, because that person doesn't want your apology for the wrong that you just may have incurred. They want you to apologize for any wrong that may have ever happened and control all of the wrongs on it. and you have to walk away from that. And so an unqualified apology is really important, and the response to that apology is equally important.
But the apology needs to be an apology. My kid is like, that wasn't a real apology. You just apologized about how it made me feel. That's bullshit.
I was actually just to say about that. It can't be an apology. It can't be, well, I'm sorry that you feel this way.
Right.
Right. That's not an apology. That's you're like, I'm sorry for your reaction because now it's offending me, know. But these are, I feel like these are conversations that I don't feel like a lot of us have been able to have even with our own parents. I'm an older millennial. And I know that there's a lot of times where I've tried to like sit down and have this conversation with my mom. And
I'm Gen X.
Never happens
until my mom had some sort of stroke. She got nice. Like there's nothing I could do or say, but I can have those conversations with my kid.
Yep. Same here. I've got a soon to be 15-year-old, and I've already told her, Doc Steph, I think you mentioned this, like, you're going to need therapy for me, just FYI. And my daughter's the sweetest. She's, no, Mom, I love you. You're being a great parent. I'm like, I know, but I have messed up, and you're going to go seek therapy, and that's okay. And I'm sorry for that, but Mom was healing too, and that's what you get.
Right.
But speaking of kids, that's something else too. About this idea of like how we pass down our own trauma to our children. And I want to say, I love that there's kind of this revolution among our Gen X and older millennials and millennial parents where we're like super in tune with that whole thing. Like we're super in tune of like realizing where our parents messed up, what we may want to take away from them, but then also what we're like, absolutely not. And I was just watching a TikTok earlier, and they were talking about how millennials killed like the traditional family gatherings because we were forced as kids to like go to the reunions, go to the holiday parties where, don't let Uncle Randy around the girls, or, keep Aunt Brenda out of the medicine cabinet, or the cousins are going to drive, even though we know they're pretty much lit by the time they get here, those sorts of things. And then we just had to accept it as kids, right? Because that's just what you did. You don't talk about it, just accept it. And then we got older and we had kids of our own and we're like, wait a minute. No, we're not doing this. Not with my kids. We're not doing this. And so I think there's even an interesting conversation around that, right? And I always go back to the conversations because I feel like it's something we have to talk about because it's something we've never talked about in the past. I got a phone call from a distant cousin of mine who had to apologize because of some of the family dynamics of our own that impacted me and my siblings. And the one thing she said is, I really wish I had said something then.
So like the silence kind of like is acceptance, but at the same time, when you're stuck in family dynamics where there's like, people have a hard time controlling their emotions and can be abusive, and they're like and then you're like, you're tiptoeing, I'm not going to say anything not to make things worse and escalating, but at the same time, how do you set your limits? And then when people, you realized after speaking maybe with cousins, like you said, because I come from a big family, and you know what, it's usually like, I don't know how to say that, but at funerals, you meet with your cousins and then you talk about your parents, and then and then you realize, oh my God, they were going through this. And it's like, when you're in it, it's just too much. But after, anyways, that's what my experience was, that when people were emotional and there was a distance, and then you sort of like realize, oh wow, like you went through this as well. And then you kind of, then you reminisce of your families, the grandparents and their parents, and you sort of connect the dots. And
yeah, and how many of those like family scripts live in our head? Like how I can't tell you how long like my grandfather's been dead, but like how his voice still resonates during certain times. And it is the part, well, thankfully I've heard F-bombs being dropped already. So it is some of the most toxic bullshit, but it's still alive and well in my mind and in my body.
Mhm.
I'm just 100% there with you. I mean, anyways, I still hear them. But I'm saying every day, but we have to focus on when we're fortunate enough to have a family member that's not a risk factor and a protective factor. I think of my grandmother, and she's so not just nurturing, but very reasonable. So I try to be more like her, and I try to change that. I like the way the script, and to think of what she says and then try to counteract, what I've learned to hear all the time. And it's like a broken record, but it's just there all the time, no matter what and when people start saying like, oh, just stop hearing it. You're like, you don't understand. You don't know how many times I've tried and it just doesn't work. So how do you deal with that?
Here's what I would ask. How do I stop hearing something that I heard for the majority of my developing years, like well into my 20s? Like well into, I'm 42 now. Probably more than half my life so far was hearing those things. How do I turn off something that I've heard so many times?
It's a
And
lot
are
of
you
effort.
helping?
Hmm?
Yeah, and then are you helping? Are you telling me differently? Or are you, again, minimizing my experience to make yourself comfortable? And so that's really where I go with a lot of this shame and blame stuff. Like, let's identify the shame, let's bring it out into the light, and let's look at it. Where do you feel the shame? Where do you feel the blame? And let's talk about it as openly as possible. Because then when people turn around and try to use that against you later and minimizing your feelings, minimizing your experience, gaslighting you into thinking, oh, that's not how that went. Because how many of us have heard that? Oh, that your mom was nothing like that. Your dad was nothing like that.
Or
That's
from a
not what I saw.
sibling. A sibling.
Mhm.
Oh, mom wasn't like that. Okay, well, you had a different mother, actually.
Yeah, I've had that from a sibling too. Like whenever I express like why I separated myself so much from my family, like ran off, joined the military, never went back. I explain it to a sibling and they're like, oh, he would never do that. That's not what kind of father he is. I'm like, maybe to you, but not to me, right? But that's where the importance of the shame and blame conversation come around. And I think it's particularly important for people with chronic illness as well, because honestly, we oftentimes feel a lot of shame around those times where we couldn't show up. How many times have we, had to cancel plans? How many times have we had to say, I'm sorry, because, I can't drive to 3 to 4 hours to go to the baby shower, because by the time you get there, you're going to need so much medication and you're going to need to have your feet up and you're going to need to recover from the drive, let alone actually enjoying the party, and so there's a lot of just shame and blame even around the own issues that we deal with, on a day-to-day basis. And oftentimes I feel like for a lot of us, we just internalize it. We grit our teeth, we smile, and we say, I'm fine. When internally, we're screaming. And what does that do? It just makes the problem worse. It's just it's almost like we've got an IV drip of stress response. And it's keeping our body in a state of alert and inflammation and pain and all the things that are going to keep us stuck in this cycle. And so that's where my work begins, is getting us out of that cycle and getting us into like saying, no, I'm not okay. And this is why. And that's okay.
And one of the tools we purposely use here to help people or help ourselves and help ground ourselves or reset ourselves is meditation, and allowing ourselves to relax a little bit and take a couple seconds for time for life so that we can meditate and have a great day and close out our show too. before because we're at the top of the hour. This is one of those discussions where I looked down at the clock and it said 50 minutes, and I was like, that's wrong. That's not right. Like, we haven't
And
been
it's
on
not
here for
enough,
50
I
minutes.
want to go on.
Yeah, like, Natasha, we're definitely going to have you back for more
Yeah, I'd
discussions.
love to
This
come
was
back.
really wonderful. I've had a great time this morning, and I want to give everyone a chance to have some time for life and view some beautiful photography. Hear Beth's voice give us a wonderful meditation and help us start the day and start the week on a strong note, because that's one of the reasons I do this show on Monday mornings, is so that the first thing I get during the new week is a discussion with friends that is uplifting and us focused, and a community that cares. So thanks everyone for being here as always with us. And Natasha, really appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So let's take a couple minutes, listen to our meditation. As always, do not close your eyes, because the photography adds to the meditation, and you'll get it. We've already released the meditation itself, so I'll have a link to it in the show notes in the end. But please enjoy today's meditation, which is Marine Life by Beth Cruz.
Welcome to our marine life meditation. Join me by taking a deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale out through your mouth. Take another deep breath in and slowly exhale out. One more deep breath in and slowly exhale out. As you listen to the calming sound of the waves and water, notice your face. If you are experiencing any tightness or tension, take this moment to release it. Allow your forehead and mouth to soften as you let your worries go. You do not need to carry them with you. Gently move your focus from your face to your neck and shoulders. If you feel any tightness, allow your shoulders to drop and release the weight you are carrying. Keep your breathing slow and rhythmic, in unison with the sound of the gentle ocean waves. Loosen your arms and hands, feeling calm move through your body as you scan for any stress or strain. Now, gently turn your focus to your core. Your core stabilizes your body and keeps it physically balanced. Take this moment to dissolve any additional worry in your center. From your core, focus on your thighs, your calves, and now your feet. Allow them to relax with the rest of your body. Take one deep breath in through your nose and slowly exhale out of your mouth. You are safe in this moment of pause. Take this with you as you move through your day and week.
Welcome back, everyone. Ooh, wrong QR code today, but that's okay. Fiona, you get a cool, quick shout out for being awesome. We're going to have you back. Thanks. There was a question in the chat, was whose meditation was that was Beth Cruz's meditation with photographs by Soso. And Beth, I'm not sure if photographs in there are yours either, or both. But I know Soso.
Just Sosos.
So this is our time. That was part of our Time for Life segment here right at the end. And to get the right QR code up, Natasha, promote yourself.
Thanks. Hi, yes, so I'm Natasha Duran Moulton. I am your friendly neighborhood life and wellness coach. So my Substack is currently free. I'm just, looking to build some community and start building some conversations about what we talked about here today. And so my Substacks are mainly letters to you, which connect out to a wider variety of things that I do, including blogs and workshops and workbooks and a children's book on anxiety, all sorts of stuff. I'm just looking mainly to connect with community. I want to start this conversation and kind of start a revolution where we take up space and we're comfortable in doing that. So that's the goal for me today.
Love that.
That's awesome.
Take up space. Take up good space and take up the
Yes.
space you're worth. I love that. We're going to have you back. You're pretty awesome. I say that to most of our guests too. Like, I can't wait to have most of our guests come back. We choose some good guests. Good job, guys. We're kicking butt over here. Self-congratulate ourselves. We find good guests.
Even though
Natasha,
I had nothing to do
pat
with
yourself
it.
on that back.
I didn't have anything to do with it.
And then Beth, promote yourself.
Oh, please follow me. I wasn't ready.
She wasn't ready.
I wasn't ready. But if you like the meditations, please follow.
Yeah, Beth is
You
our
definitely-
meditation master.
You'll definitely have an extra follow from me because that meditation was perfect. Loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as always, we put the meditations out on Sick of the Shit publications to help drive traffic for Beth. To Beth, she is the author of those ones. I just get to post. I just post them, and I love them. And I'm glad you all really enjoy them too. I'm glad everyone does. And shout out to Margaret Williams, who introduced Soso and this group to Natasha, even accidentally, because accidental greatness is still greatness.
Thank you so much, Margaret. We do appreciate you.
And Steph, how about you, Dr. Stephanie Wilson?
So I have a show, Freedom Over Fascism, which is both a live on Tuesdays and Wednesdays and an audio podcast talking about the context in which we live. This week I have Tara McGowan from the publisher of Courier Media and Ellie Leonard. But I want to say, I said it in the chat, I am thinking about doing a show about parenting and menopause and being in the sandwich generation and chronically ill and all of that stuff. And so I would love feedback if you didn't get to give it to me before about whether that's something that people would like to have in the menu of things.
I think people would. I know you got some good responses in the chat from it too today, and I'm glad you got to ask or got to announce that or ask about it, because I think it would be useful. I think parenting groups of any sort right now, even like just parenting groups right now are probably super useful. We all need support. We all need support,
especially for the neurodivergent kid.
Yeah.
Or parents. Yeah.
Or both, the combination of. And then Soso, promote yourself, my friend.
Hi. Well, I'm Soso. My Substack is Soso's World because, as you can see, when I can, I try to travel and get moving. And I am so grateful to have the space and the wonderful voice and intelligence of Beth, who's just, using the pictures to create those wonderful meditation. And I am actually glad because, I have so many stuck on my computer and I'm just happy that they're out there. So, Yeah, and we also have a show on Wednesday. Beth Cruz and I. It's called Time for Life. Time for Life is a space that you take for try to get away from the doom and gloom, and we try to talk about what brings us joy. So it's very positive. It's every Wednesday at 12 Eastern.
Thanks, Sosa. And yeah, join them for Time for Life every Wednesday. It's fun. It's an amazing. It gets to expand the world of Sick of This Shit publications and offers a community space, and that's sort of what we're here for, is to build the community space and get us all so that we can see ourselves and feel included and feel and know that we matter. And so this is where I start my week here on Sick of This Shit publications, is chronically illing out with you all. And then the rest of my week is a lot of masculinity discussions and trying to change the narrative around masculinity and build a manosphere that doesn't suck, one that is welcoming, and one that is open and inviting to people to come in and participate in and learn from and grow from, because now you know so you can grow. And this, for anyone new in the audience, our regular group is myself, Soso, Steph, and Beth Cruz. Natasha is our wonderful special guest today. And so we're so glad to have had Natasha with us. And yes, we are here every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern to start your week. Before noon, get a great late morning break. If you're on the East Coast, if you're on the West Coast, a great way to wake up. And then Time for Life is every Wednesday at noon Eastern. Those are two of our main shows. We also have plenty of others. And so come support me here at Sick of This Shit publications. Also, big announcement for the week, and I'll shift off of the QR code. Before we go, one final big announcement for the week is on Friday. You will all get to see me in Minneapolis. I have been invited to represent and accepted on the sponsorship and to represent Veterans Fighting Fascism. And so I will be in Minneapolis for the Dropkick Murphy community concert that is celebrating life and tribute to Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and for me, all of the others who were...
I couldn't get it.
And for all of the others who were taken too soon, and for defending our freedoms and standing up for our freedoms, is I'm going to go support and represent our community under the sponsorship and as part of Veterans Fighting Fascism, which aligns with the work that we're doing, which is work that I support. It's the Anti-Fascist Book Club. I've helped write some of or put together the book list for some of the new work that's coming out. And I'm so excited to be there on Friday, March 6th. You'll see me in Minneapolis. So if you're in the area, come say hi. If you're not in the area, I'll make sure there's some live streams going on at points, at least through me. It's also sponsored in part by Valor Media Network and the Save America movement. So I'm going to try and meet other creators that we know and love, and see what we can do for our community to ensure that we're visible and we stay visible and we stay constantly visible, because we need space. We take up space. You deserve that space. You value because you matter. And we're sick of this shit here. And so we're doing it. And so everyone, have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you again next Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. This has been Chronically Illing Out on Sick of This Shit publications. If you're on a MacBook, you can turn on your emojis, and you can... if I can teach you sometime if you're on a MacBook. And so everyone, have a wonderful week. Yeah. So you were going to say something.
I was about to say, Natasha, can you stick around for 5 minutes?
Yeah, definitely stick around afterwards.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Thanks, Substack family. Thanks those on YouTube and Twitch who are joining us. We will see you again next week. Have a great week, y'all.